All right, let's see. I think we're live. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Freight Friday. What is everyone drinking for beer? So I've got a new beer today. I actually found this. It's really good if anybody's had this before.
Butter's good.
A little yeah, it's super good,
Yeah,
right?
good.
I'm loving it right now. So this is been my favorite beer so far, but if I'm a little bit more happy than normal. It's because the bottle's actually a lot larger than a normal beer bottle. But happy Freight Friday, everybody. Look, Rhonda's with us. Love my Rhonda. I saw Guy Byers is here. What an honor for him to show up. If you guys are not on YouTube, if you're on LinkedIn or somewhere else, come on over to YouTube, make some friends, get in the chat and talk it up because you guys, today we have the honor of having the CEO of Convoy on the show. And you can ask him any question you want, with respect, of course. But I think it's a good opportunity to get access to this level of experience and this type of company. So before we get started, of course, we've got our sponsor, my favorite factoring company, OTR Capital. I want you guys to remember one thing about OTR Capital. Okay, for brokers, for carriers. I never ask them. I keep forgetting to ask. I should ask if they can do shippers too. But when you use them for factoring, they'll treat you like family. And that's important. You guys all know that I'm more about people than companies. I'm not really a fan of companies. So OTR will be in the comments. Say hello to them. They will take care of you. No hidden fees, no games, no playing with your data. They'll take care of your back office operations. So don't forget to choose OTR Capital. Look at everybody who's in. Troy Andrews is with us. Mick is with us. Hi, Mick. The freight coach is in the house. And everybody, I have a new gaming headset. This isn't the one that Dr. Disrespect uses. That one looked funny on me, but this is a different one. So, hey, V's in the house. V, let us know what game I should play since I've got a new gaming headset. I'm going to get on Twitch. Is anybody on Twitch? I really want to do like a show on Twitch. And I know V is very tech savvy. He can tell you the Cornell crust. Thank you, V. You're the best. Okay, I'm going to introduce Dan. Dan, welcome to the party. You actually get to be here on your own. I know last time you were on, you had a couple guests, and it was a little wild. I think that I think that debate is still one of the internet's favorite debate in transportation. But thank you for coming back and not being scared off. How's Convoy doing lately?
Convoy's great.
What are you guys working on?
Oh man, we are working on so many things right now, actually. So we have really thought about like, what are we going to be next year? The business has changed in terms of like the kinds of conversations we're having. We covered some of that in the last time that I was here. We've really started to think about like, based on all the things we've learned this year, kind of the depth of relationship we've been able to kind of obtain now with a lot of our customers, a lot of the drivers, carriers we're working with. Like, what do they really need? Kind of maybe a recentering around the customer is one way I've thought about it for next year. And there are so many things that I think we can build. We have a really, fantastic in-house technology team, and a company that really like across the board is getting more dialed in on what do our customers want. So I think that's a big focus for what we're working on. It's like going into next year, what are the things that our customers need, shippers, carriers, et cetera, the partners we're working with, and how do we build for them? That's what I'm all about right now.
Yeah. I was going to ask you who you define as your customers.
Yeah. So the folks that pay Convoy today are shippers that we work with. And that is the customer that we do business with from that perspective. But there is no business without the carriers and drivers that we partner with as well. And so when we think about like, who are we serving, it's both. And there's like, you can't just do one or the other. We've actually also expanded into a world now where we're doing a lot of integrations with TMS systems and some other technology partners as well. So, I really think about it as this is a two-sided marketplace. There isn't an option to like say we only care about one side or something like that. So it's about how do we identify the needs, the challenges, the problems that each side's having, and then build stuff that solves that. So that's, I think, about both.
Since our debate, which for those of you who haven't seen it, just go when you're done watching this live interview, you'll see it right away on my YouTube page. So I've been thinking a lot about the debate, and one thing that actually Ron, our Madtropolis shipper, said a couple times, or maybe he said it to me after, I can't remember, but he talked about, what it's like to be the customer. And I've heard this before from other customers where they say, hey, I'm the shipper, I'm paying the bills, but sometimes I feel like sometimes the industry likes to tell us what we need and not the other way around. And interestingly enough, I was on Facebook today and a carrier had done the same. They said, hey, brokers, just because you don't get your BOL, you should not get angry at us if you don't get your BOL within a certain amount of time. You should calm down. We have a lot of work to do, or something like that. And I kept asking that carrier, I said, well, who's your customer? And he kept saying, well, he started talking about the shipper. And I told him, but isn't the broker your customer too? And are we missing who the customer is in different angles? And I'm sorry to go on this, but can't stop thinking about it, is that what does the customer want right now from a shipper perspective? And do you think carriers sometimes forget who their customer is? Or do you guys forget sometimes the carrier's a customer too? Kind of a lengthy question for you. You can go any direction with that one.
There's a lot there. So one, it is hard to remember who your customer is, period, sometimes.
It is. Even as a lawyer, sometimes I'm like, no, I'm going to tell you what to do. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Even within Convoy, like I think of us, I founded the company basically by going out and talking to a bunch of people to learn what they needed. So it was I didn't know the answers when I started. That gave me a huge advantage. I didn't know how to do it. The only way I knew what to do was to go ask everybody what wasn't working, what they wanted, and then try to build something that did it. But even so, and I think Convoy is a very customer-oriented company in our DNA, we have had a lot of challenges as we grow and scale of always staying aligned around the customer, and who is the person that we're serving, and are we aligned around that, and making sure that's consistent. I think that's something that every company faces, but it's important to continue to do that. And it's hard. And I think the other thing to think about, you were saying, like, isn't the broker the customer, or who's the customer in that relationship? Let's just start off by saying, anyone who's ever been in the middle of something realizes being in the middle is hard. Whether it's a family matter, a relationship, someone's come to you, they're asking you to help and broker something, anybody who's in the middle of like two sides of an equation is dealing with some tough things. And the value that people bring that are in the middle, quote unquote, is that they can understand both sides really well and help make the right prioritizations and trade-offs, and also help communicate and represent to the other side the interests of both parties, right? Because for this all to work, it has to work together. So I think, the word broker has been used in a lot of ways. Some people love it, hate it, all the things over time. But effectively, whether you're a large asset carrier or a broker, you're rebrokering freight to smaller carriers regularly. So there's a bit of a middleman experience that either side has. And both sides, like, I feel like just being in the middle is tough. So it is also, as a middleman and broker, like, that's tough, right? People get, there's a lot of like fingers pointed, but there has to be good intentions. And I think it's up to the folks in the middle. And we think of ourselves as a digital freight network. So we go, I think, way beyond the capabilities of a lot of traditional brokers, but effectively, like, it's up to us to be the most customer centric. Like, we have to understand the customer on both sides, because we're actually the one in the middle. And that's a hard position in anything, like I said, personal work, whatever. But when you're in that position, that's your job. You got to know what both sides need, and then you got to represent that and make that happen across two different groups, maybe with different priorities. So there are going to be times when, a shipper, carrier, driver, et cetera, are looking and saying, hey, this doesn't make sense to me. I'm frustrated about this. And it's our job to listen, be curious, understand, and then try to improve the situation going forward. And I always say to my company, like, look, I remember one time somebody recently, Convoy's like, well, are we creating a digital freight network, or is this like more technology-enabled brokerage, or like, which thing is it? And there's a famous saying, which is like, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. So like, we have built there are so many things that like other people will have in the future that only a few people have today. In freight, there are so many companies that are experiencing different service levels, different experiences with the technology partners they use. Some people have a great experience. Some people have a poor experience. At the end of the day, it's like, we have to focus on doing a great job today with what we have, building trust, and then partnering with those customers so we can then build the future of freight. And you're doing it at the same time. You're delivering today and building the future. That's why you have to be customer centric as a broker here. And I think that like, that's how I think about customers.
So are you guys a broker? Do you guys consider yourselves a broker? I'm not very good at this. I know everybody comes up with different names and they do pretty stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yes, technically we are a registered broker. The challenge with that though is that like there are a lot of stereotypes or like, you know, concepts of what a broker is. And frankly, like even within like the 15,000 brokers there are in the country, there's a huge variety. Even, you know, today, there's a very wide range of what that means. And for me and for Convoy, we tend to think of ourselves as a digital freight network. And the capabilities of that mean that when we show up for our customer, the way we work as a broker through this distributed long tail network of small trucking companies and medium-sized trucking companies, owner operators, using our platform, means that we can have the same level of flexibility and adaptability to the market as a broker. But we can also set up ourselves to have the same level of reliability, network planning, and discipline as an asset-based carrier. So I don't think shippers in the future should have to think like, well, am I picking one or the other for this scenario or that scenario? You can actually, like, we can solve all those problems by having a long tail distributed network of carriers that are also plugged into a platform. So we have that visibility, that connection, that relationship. And it feels more like a concerted effort across that network. So you can do both.
Zeke, can you put up May's question again? Because that's the biggest one. When I was looking at different posts in social media, and then I was flagging my friends, and I said, hey, what's your experience been with Convoy? What do you think about Convoy? Do you guys haul freight for Convoy, especially from the carrier market? I can tell you the very first thing people said unilaterally, like I think one of these posts, I have like 30 responses. Another one was like 20 responses. Every single person was saying the same theme, which was, we liked their, as a carrier, we liked their technology. It was easy to use, easy to book, but if anything goes wrong, you won't get help from them at all. And they talk about how you guys use people overseas, they can't speak English, or they say they have like these canned responses that they give, and it's incredibly difficult to work with them. So if it was like one or two, but then, you know, May is one of our Madtropolis people, and she says something very similar. So what have you been doing lately to combat that kind of chatter or feedback from carriers? Because that is, I'm sure that's hard to figure out.
I mean, if that were true, we wouldn't have a business at all. There is no business if carriers can't get support and get help from Convoy when something goes wrong, because everybody knows stuff goes wrong all the time in freight. And there's no way technology is going to solve all of that out the gate. Like, you have to experience it, then learn how to build it into the tech. And, you know, when we, but things do go wrong. Like, for example, there was a driver that was emailing me and, you know, and emailed our service and was frustrated. Like, there was a situation where they had arrived at the facility, the stuff they were going to haul wasn't ready. It was delayed. We had trouble getting in touch with the shipper and getting confirmation as to when it wasn't happening, getting back to them. It was slow. It was arduous. They had to call several times, and we weren't super responsive in that case. I think there were some issues around that as well. And like, that happens, and we need to get better at that. And there's things we're building in terms of getting, you know, more automated connectivity with our shippers, consistently building that visibility into our platform. But it does happen sometimes where something just fails. And it was funny. I mean, I personally am interested in that. I wrote back, engaged with that person. They'd already gotten it resolved through our team. They were appreciative that like I would take the time to write back. They said they'd sent me an email and said to their friends that they would never hear from me. And I was like, I wrote back because I actually care about what they're experiencing. So I don't think that it would be possible for us to like not resolve problems like that and have a business. They exist. The majority of our operations support staff is in Atlanta and Seattle. We do have some folks that are out of the country as well. And I think it's a combination. We have multiple groups in different time zones around the world and in different situations, but, you know, the vast majority is in the United States at this point. And we have a whole like full stack of service. There's no way tech just does this. Honestly, like we're not there yet. And I think that even in the future, we're going to automate more and more things. There will always be a need for people helping to support exceptions when they happen and kind of managing through things that aren't predictable.
Okay, so Michael Caney's comment is the one that I was thinking too, which is if you aggregate enough freight carriers to have to do business with you, you will have a business continued. And I think that's like the Uber concept as well. And that was the first thing that popped in my head when you said, well, we wouldn't have a business if we had that many problems. And I worry just a little bit because I'm like, oh, that sucks because I like Convoy and I like that they have that automation. But man, I thought maybe you'd tell me like there's this huge initiative going on where you're going to train people, they're going to respond on calls, they're going to be freight trained for problems, blah, 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 blah. Not as much. We wouldn't have a business, Cassandra.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. That was implied. Like we have all that. I thought I didn't realize you didn't. That wasn't clear. We have a large trained team in multiple sites, majority in the U.S. that gets on the phone with carriers and deals with challenges that come up, dealing with thousands of emails, thousands of phone calls every day from carriers. So that is a well-oiled machine. We have a bunch of people, a big technology team building software for that group. We have a big operations team. We brought in incredibly talented people in that area, and we're continuing to get better. My point was if we hadn't done that, what I just described, we wouldn't have a business. So we've done all that so we can provide support to our carriers and drivers. My other point was it's not perfect. We've built a lot of technology, but it does still require that team. That's why we have that team. And so I guess what I meant was I don't like the assertion that doesn't exist just isn't accurate, obviously, because there are hundreds of people doing that for Convoy today. But I truly, I believe that service matters, and that's why we have to like actually pay attention to those things. When we first started, we wrote up on a board. Actually, that was a big distinction, I think, between us and some of the other technology-centric companies back in 2014, 2015 that were getting into this space. There were several that started and didn't have that. And their goal was to directly connect, effectively take out what they said, let's take out the brokerage and the support piece and just have technology to make it run. And that it doesn't work. Mm-mm. And we thought about I remember writing on a whiteboard in our first office back in 15, all the steps that I was aware of in like how this process worked from start to finish. And underneath each one, I wrote 3 numbers. I said, what percentage of this do I think is going to be automated, which means nobody has to do it anymore? What percentage do I think is going to be self-service, which means we can create a tool so the carrier or the driver can do it for themselves without having to call in, which a lot of people prefer, honestly. And then what percentage of this is going to be what I called manual at the time, which is Convoy is going to have to provide that support for every step in the way. And none of those started as 0% for what Convoy is going to have to do. We knew we would have a lot of work and support to provide. But over the years, we have been able to shift more of that to be automated or self-service. And a lot of people love it. I'll give you an example, like the automated matching. So when a carrier is able to find freight in Convoy's app, whether it's a single load, a round trip, a tour, whether they're going to find that backhaul in there or not, they can take care of that themselves. And there are a lot of folks who would actually prefer to accept the price they see in the app or bid on it and then win the freight without having to call and negotiate with someone on the phone.
Yeah. Especially
if you're like an ESL driver and English isn't your first language, like that's a huge disadvantage to call, or if you're new and you want to like know if you're getting a fair rate or not. So,
yes.
So I think like there's a bunch of things where that self-service mechanism through the tech is great, but I want to be super clear with your audience and with everybody. Like there is no universe where Convoy is not supporting our customers with people who understand the business and who understand freight. And there are areas where we aren't perfect there, so we need to do better. But absolutely, that exists today, and is a huge part of what we do.
One thing that I was thinking about when you said that some of the service that you can offer to carriers so they don't have to call in is if they don't speak English. And you and I were talking a little bit about Central America. And I have this could be inaccurate, but my view, and I am in Central America right now, and I want to promote my show as much as possible because I do view a lot of our drivers are coming from Central America, and it's becoming more of the dominant group, and they speak Spanish. So does your technology allow them to converse and see everything in Spanish and in other languages?
So it's a really interesting question. We've thought a lot about that. We have a lot of people who don't speak English as their first language, maybe who do speak English, but also just prefer to see things written out because it's clear, and they might miss something when they're on a phone call. You know, it's gonna be hard to like hear a lot of information and process it all. We haven't built like a bunch of different languages into the app. And what we decided to do was to try to design it in a way where it was a little bit language agnostic. Like the actual design of the experience and the way that we like create that software, like makes it more clear what we're talking about. And a lot of users, we've been able to get to use it and train and who use it regularly in English. But like the majority of this, maybe symbols or graphics or like the way it's designed and organized is just intuitive, independent of language.
Mm-hmm. I keep thinking about making MadGaines, like right now with a marketing company, lean marketing. Actually, they're doing all my graphics and they're redoing my website, and I really want them to build out my website and a company I'm developing to target those who are not from America, who are their first language is not English. And so I just asked you that question a little bit selfish because I wanted to see what you guys were up to. Because I think that you're right. It is hard. It is better to see things in writing when your English is not your first language. But in our development of that website, it's been kind of hard to accurately do it in another language. So it's kind of cool.
And we have people that if someone calls in and speaks, Spanish, for example, and refer to that, that will speak in Spanish as well. I was our first Spanish-speaking customer service rep, and we added.
I love that. So to go back to the beginning, though, how did you start out in freight, or were you brand new to freight when you started Convoy? I don't know the back history, and you didn't get a chance to tell it last time you were on the show.
Yeah. All right. Let me tell you a little bit about it then. So the short answer to that is that I had some experience in supply chain, but I did not have experience in truckload freight. So I was new. My background is, so I'm born and raised in Seattle. My grandfather had started, and my dad and uncle had run for a while, a mom and pop office supply distribution company around the Seattle area. And, for that, I packed trucks, drove straight trucks, and delivered, and did a bunch of other random stuff. They had me do accounts receivable because I guess me calling people and asking them to pay was like, I was good at that and sounded like, like non-threatening. But I kind of grew up in a small kind of family business around that. And that was my job every summer during high school and college. Didn't make me think, oh, someday I'm going to like do something in logistics, but I definitely understood like the idea of a route and the idea of delivery and having the paperwork and like all that stuff. After school, I ended up getting into transportation through a consulting company that I joined. And so I did a bunch of work in maintenance, repair, and overhaul for aircraft and engines and APUs in the aviation sector. Did a bunch of warehousing optimization work. Got a chance to work with the Panama Canal for a while and thought a lot about ocean shipping and ocean freight.
That is so cool.
Was able to do, I ended up living in Europe for a while, working for a European airline, lived in Latin America a little bit. And then across the United States for a bunch of clients here that were like focusing on supply chain and transportation. From there, I moved to Seattle to have my first child. I have two daughters, 9, 11. And ended up, that was actually a crazy long story I will not tell on the show. But my wife and I I'd saved up all these miles, like tons of miles, and it was right before we're gonna have our first kid. So during when she was pregnant, during the second trimester, we took like a round the world trip. And you spent entirely on miles. Like you did points and got like 2 round the trip tickets on the One World lines. Had this incredible journey. But during that journey, it was October 2008, and the stock market completely collapsed. Our bank went out of business. We weren't really online, and I, for some dumb reason, put all the like savings I'd had into different stocks and equities, and lost 80% of that or whatever. And like got back, didn't have a job, didn't have any money saved up. Bank was gone. Nobody was hiring. 6 months pregnant. So that was a moment. Got back to Seattle, and just hustled. Like got out there and did 5-6 meetings a day. Nobody would interview me. Nobody was interested at the time. I ended up getting a job at Microsoft through a friend. And, really, I told that story just to give a little bit of my care, like where I come from. Like, I kind of felt like I've always felt like I need to work for it, because things were, you got to like make it happen. So I was like, I'm not going to be in a position where, I don't have a job with a new kid and stuff. So I ended up working my way into that. And then ultimately ended up in tech for a while and ended up at Amazon, where I kind of had this moment where I realized, wow, the supply chain is just so disruptive. And, my thesis on this, when I looked at Prime and like how successful it was before online shopping, everybody just went to the store and bought the thing the day they wanted it or the day before. That was the normal routine. And people procrastinate. That's normal. And then online shopping comes around and it's like, oh, well, I could buy it 5 to 7 days in advance online, which means I can be kind of lazy, but I can't procrastinate. Or I can wait and buy it the day I need it at the store. And then all of a sudden you get 2-day delivery and it's like, oh, I can procrastinate and be lazy. I can like order and it shows up in 2 days. That's amazing. And then one day, oh my God, like, right, it keeps getting better and better. And what was so powerful about that is it wasn't just that experience. It was the fact that actually meant that people changed their behavior. Because I actually studied cognitive science and psychology in college. People procrastinate. So everybody waits to the last minute. Once you wait till there's 2 or 1 days left, the only place you can order is the person that can deliver it to you in 1 to 2 days. So you have a total monopoly over people who are in that, like, I'm a Prime customer and there's 2 days left.
Yeah.
Right? That period when Prime was just getting going. So I saw some of this and saw some of the data. I was like, man, supply chain, it's going to impact so many things out there. And it's so impactful. And it's changing so much. And every other company is now going to be figuring out, like, how is supply chain strategic for me? And how is it going to change my game? And am I at risk of not innovating in this area? And I'd want to start a company. So I just started doing a bunch of exploration. I left Amazon, spent about 8 weeks just going directly. I went to a bunch of truck stops, warehouses, called everybody I used to know in supply chain. My mom's an ESL teacher. We used to host Eastern European refugees and immigrants that were coming, like, out of the Soviet Union, things like that. And so a lot of them became truck drivers and like talked to a couple of them, had this great network of people that like talked to me about trucking and about supply chain. And I realized through that experience that there was such a love-hate relationship between the participants in the truckload space. And I remember very distinctly being at a truck stop in Marysville, Washington, with a guy who'd been driving for 30 years. He'd been a team driver for a while, was driving single owner operator at that point. And that was the first thing he said. He was one of the first people I ever spoke with. He's like, Dan, I have a love-hate relationship with everybody in the industry. I was like, oh, tell me more. Like, let's dive in a little bit here. And I was like, okay, I think maybe if we can create some transparency, some visibility into what's going on, give you a little bit more control over your destiny, give you the ability to kind of like have options in front of you in this app. And we can then like track the visibility and the location so we can share that with you and with the customer so you guys can be on the same page. We can work on like making pricing more upfront and transparent. We can do better. And that was the genesis of the company, was that tour of duty, just going and asking over 100 people in that time period what wasn't working. And then taking all that home and working on it, and then going back to actually the way I got all our first customers and kind of first drivers and everything was all the people I talked to during that learning period. I just got them to be our first people we worked with. And so they were my, I was building for them. And that's why I said earlier, it was about the customer. It was about the drivers, the carriers, the shippers. I didn't know better. I was just like, what do you guys need? And that's how we started this. And so that was the founding of Convoy. It was a discovery experience of like, what do people need? Later on, I plugged in, had a ton of respect I didn't come into this like, I think everyone's doing it wrong. I just came into it like, I think technology is going to help us do this better. And there were a lot of challenges. Because we know everything is getting where it needs to go for the most part, but how do we do that in a more efficient, less wasteful, more respectful and supportive way across the constituents so this works better? And the last thing I'll say is, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you, how did you balance the, after you're speaking to the carriers and you kind of got a really good feeling for how you could be different with technology, how do you still maintain the relationship with those carriers that really want to talk to somebody. I saw the comments come through and somebody made a really good point that some of those carrier drivers out there, they just want to talk to somebody sometimes. How did you balance that? Because I know once we get too much technology, you lose a little bit of the relationship and you've got to find a way to pull back.
Yeah. And you're right. That is first and foremost going to be an ongoing balance as we try to create technology that automates and makes things self-service that a lot of people like, with the fact that a lot of people also want to have that direct relationship.
Because it's a hard balance. Like people like me, I don't want to talk on the phone with anybody. Like, but then you've got this whole generation that wants to do nothing but talk on the phone.
Yeah. So Convoy is by definition building for both, but relative to the average, probably more biased towards folks that want to do it themselves, because we're building a technology option for them to do that. And we're kind of building a system where that's possible. But certainly we had a bunch of conversations with carriers, and still do, and drivers who want to just catch up. But one thing we would do is we'd ask them questions. That was a big part of it. How's it going? What do you need? What's working? What's not working? And we would use those conversations as a way to learn more, and write it down, think about how we could improve from that. So that's one thing we did. And it was the time when we were first doing this was right when this was changing. And that was, so if you remember back to 2014, you could, like, a lot of truck drivers did not have smartphones. If you went to AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, back then,
that's true.
And you got your 2-year upgrade, every 2 years you turned in your phone, you got your new phone. The free phone was not a smartphone with Android or iOS on it until late 2014. It was the Galaxy S3 Android phone. And so until then, a lot of truck drivers didn't have a smartphone with Android or iOS. So you couldn't even do this. This was impossible at that point. There was no way to build something like this. But once that happened, then it created the option to automate and make that self-service via that platform, or you could have that conversation. So the decision really started in 2015, and we've been working on both since then. But we're biasing towards technology and automation.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to hop over to the comments. I saw some really good questions come in through the comments. So for those of you just joining us, we're talking to the CEO of Convoy, one of our favorite people, Dan Lewis. And if you have a question for him, pop it into the comments and we'll ask. So this is a selfish question because I have been dying to meet someone who could answer it, or give me more details. When I imagine who our current truck drivers are, and owner operators, smaller companies, I know in my head, I'm like, okay, usually they range around like the 50-year-old plus. They're the white guys or the American rah, rah, rah. That's the dumb Cassandra answer to that question. When you start to imagine next generation of truck drivers, what kind of characteristics and genres and whatnot do you apply to that so you know how to design your technology and your service and whatnot? Because I truly do not know the answer to this. I'm looking for somebody who does sometimes. Yeah,
absolutely. So first off, if you're like, we have a group of carriers called our Hall Stars. They are awesome. They love the system. They're dialing into the system of Convoy. And you can take a look at that. There's some posts we've made online about that and get a sense, of who those carriers are. And if you take a look, like, you'll see a pretty diverse range of carriers, a pretty diverse range of like superstar carriers. So I would encourage everybody to check out Hall Stars to see what that is. And I think there's a couple things. One is, even the traditional kind of maybe stereotypical owner operator small carrier that you just described. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot of time on the road and a lot of time where people are using phones. So I think 5 years ago, people weren't, 10 years ago, weren't using smartphones in that same way on the road. But now the smartphone is what people are using all the time on the road during downtime. They're staying in touch with family, their friends, video chat, playing games, like checking the news, whatever, like all these things. It's all about the phone now. So it's actually, those differences are dissolving. Whereas people are super comfortable using the phone for all these things. And so I actually think that was a bigger issue early on. And there were some, let's say, folks that, as I mentioned, maybe folks who were on the younger side or who were newer to trucking or who saw that self-service option as a big advantage for them versus being on the phone negotiating, where they were the earlier adopters. But at this point, if you're on the road, you got a smartphone and you're using that thing all the time, vast majority of people, to do a bunch of stuff. And so it's not foreign, it's not weird, it's not out of place. People have hundreds of apps. Like, it's not that there was this big fear early on that people wouldn't want to add a couple apps or more apps, but like that's not really a thing anymore. People just add apps and they use them when they do them. So that was a concern, I think, across lots of industries early on. That's not really a thing, I don't think, for most people, at least. I'm sure for some people, but not for most people.
I agree. Okay, I saw Mr. Fink. Where are you? He's one of my favorite people in the whole world, besides Andrew Teal. Where did Mr. Fink? Yeah, Fink. Where did your question go? He had a really good question for you that, Lord, I cannot find it for the life of me. And it was more than, there you go. Damn, Z, you are good, Zeke. Okay. Dan, perhaps you cannot answer, but in your short journey, did anyone big approach you to purchase or to partner, interested in your 5-year plan? And you can broaden that question if you want. If you don't want to be specific, you could broaden it and say this big company came to us and we tried to figure out, do I want to retire in the woods of Washington and leave the freight world, or stay and change it?
I'm already in the woods of Washington here. The forest out there.
I love it.
Bobcat came through the other day. All right. So yes, that's the answer.
Yes. Okay. I did say you can answer it generally.
So, I don't want to get into specifics, but there are companies where it would, there could be some strategic things that make sense, and it has come up.
Okay. It's Cassandra, selfish Cassandra, again, because this is my show. I get to be as selfish as I want to. After you came on to the show for the big debate, afterward, a bunch of people from your company messaged me, like really sweet, like insightful, amazing messages. And then a couple of folks invited me to a Convoy women's group to come speak and whatnot, and we're figuring out dates. I can tell you that never in my entire career, out of all the companies I've worked for in this industry, has anyone sent me messages like that or invited me to a women's group. I don't even know the last company I worked for that even had a women's group. Shame on me if maybe a little bit is my fault. What I'm saying is that I kind of don't want Convoy to be acquired by a big company. I was kind of hoping Convoy would acquire other companies and keep growing because I would like more your culture in our industry if I'm getting the right vibe from your culture. So selfish Cassandra, just had to say that.
So thank you for saying that. Thank you to everybody from Convoy who's watching and who hears that. I think we do have a really great culture.
We do.
And I think there's a lot of groups that and that it's about building community too, right? Like people join a company, and when we're working for a company, we're all about that company mission and trying to achieve things for the company. And one of the ways you do that successfully is by building strong relationships and trust and bonds between the people at the company. So and that's like part of the culture you want to set up and create the space for that. It's been hard in a virtual world, but we're trying to maintain that. And, that's the bottom line, is like, how do you create an environment where you can bring out the best in the other people you work with and trust them? Because everybody knows when you trust people, you do better work together, and like building those connections is super important. Another thing we do, and I would like to, I do think there's an opportunity for Convoy to continue to grow organically. There may be situations where it is the right thing for us to acquire another company or bring another company in. But when we think about this, the previous question said the 5-year plan as well. 5-year plan is let's realize the opportunity in front of us, the potential of what we're doing. There's so much potential to what we're doing, and that's the plan. So there are different ways to get there, and we're looking at those, and we're going to be opportunistic. But the plan is let's realize that, and let's make Convoy something that can help lead, the industry in a direction that I think a lot of people are already going and want to go, but we want to help lead in that direction. And I love the fact that one thing we've done since we started is bring in people to come speak from all over and talk to us about what they think. And I brought a lot of our investors in. I brought a lot of people in the industry in, or other people to come just talk and do a fireside chat with us about what they're thinking, and we can ask them questions and learn. We do an all hands every week, and we do that often in those cases. And we try to get people from the industry to come and talk to the company. So I'm super excited that's happening and that you're going to come do that. That's, again, the learning culture. We don't want to isolate ourselves. Like and people that know me in this industry, I didn't like I didn't try to like separate myself from the industry and think I would figure it all out. I was like, let's get out there and learn and talk. And like, I get inspired and I get so many great ideas from people who have been in the industry for a much longer time than I have. Even, some of our competitors are just great ideas about things that we should be thinking about and we can go do. And I want to share that back.
I love that. Vitaly had a question for you that I was interested in as well. Oh, here it is. Can a system like Convoys work for LTL or even deeper parcel? And can I add to that? Could we also talk about, I think when Vitaly means parcel, maybe he's talking about final mile too. I was going to throw final mile on there, but I realized he said parcel.
Yeah.
I love Vitaly. He's also in Canada as well, if you wanted to talk about Canada too. I have a lot of Canadians on my show.
Nice. So the general approach of let's study the problem, talk to the people talk to the customers, talk to the people who are driving, really look at where there could be better visibility data, where the friction points, how do we measure things better and learn and then iterate and improve. Like that model of running a company absolutely can apply to other parts of transportation, other steps in the transportation chain, or modes of transportation or programs like LTL. Absolutely. I think it's very different. I don't think we could take what Convoy does for truckload and just turn on LTL. It's a completely different model. But I think the same like philosophy and approach to how we built this, we could use to go after other modes of transportation or the intersection of trucks and facilities, which I think there's a ton of opportunity for efficiency and waste reduction there too. And the answer is, I think that certainly can, but certainly, we couldn't just plug, Convoy's not plug and play into LTL right now.
There were a couple other questions that popped up. I just want to make sure everybody knows that I am trying to keep an eye on your questions. I've seen a lot of folks have some really good questions come through. Todd Waldron, where did you go? You had a good question. Okay, I'm gonna entertain this for a moment, just because Todd is consistently on the show. He's one of our favorite Madtropolis carriers, based out of Minnesota, which I think he's probably very cold right now. He says, "So are you not a digital broker, but a broker with technology? Does distinction even matter to you?"
We need to have a conversation to know what the distinction is. We're a company that is trying to understand like what capabilities need to exist for people to have a great experience, like a world-class experience at getting the freight moved in the way they need it moved with the lowest possible cost structure and lowest waste. And so we use technology to do that. And today we do that through a network of tens of thousands of small carriers and owner operators. That's what we are, a digital freight network where they're plugged into this network. They get a lot of advantages and benefits of being part of that network, in addition to just the freight that they're getting from Convoy. And we connect our shippers into that so they can get access based on insights into all this information that helps them understand how their facility is operating relative to other facilities, how they're performing, what they can learn from the network of freight that's moving for them, how they can improve their cost structure, what they can do to help reduce waste as well. And so sorry. Digital freight network, like that's how we think about it. It's a network of carriers that's on a digital platform that lets us move freight in the most efficient, least wasteful way possible. Our mission is endless capacity with zero waste. Like that's a big evergreen long-term North Star. It's going to be probably forever before we ever get to zero waste. But it's like, how do we do it the most efficient way possible while still giving the shippers the service and experience that they need from a capacity perspective? And how do we have a network of carriers that is able to deliver that in the most efficient way possible? Efficiency is great for everybody. It's less environmental waste, it's less money wasted, it's less time wasted. And I think people like being productive. So like, that's what we want to go do.
Z, you put up a question right before May. It was a good one. Yeah, that one. Hi, Matt. Matt asks, Dan, are there commodities or business segments that Convoy turns down for customer opportunities? Because not every customer is a good one or a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. There are. there's a lot of like today we're focusing specifically on dry van and refrigerated temp controlled truckload freight. So outside of that, we do turn down quite a bit. We do a little bit of flatbed, but very little right now. And so outside of those areas, and we're not going to do. We're limiting ourselves. There are also there's several commodities within that we also aren't moving. We don't do a lot of hazardous materials. So we want to be careful. And when we first started, and Matt, to your question, like we only did Washington, and actually when we first started, we did Seattle area.
Oh, that's cool.
Then I was like, okay, let's do Western Washington. Then we did like Portland in the Northwest. Then we did the I-5 corridor. Then we added Texas. Then we slowly and methodically over several years did the United States. And I remember during that time period, a lot of our shippers constantly were asking, why can't you do the rest of the country for me? Every other broker I work with can just turn on wherever I ask them, more or less. Not entirely that way, but there was this frustration that we wouldn't do that. And my feeling on it was, that's because I'm going to deliver on what I said I was going to do, which is I want to be able to have a network of carriers and drivers that are using the technology so that we can deliver on the thing we said we were going to do. And again, imperfect, but like really trying to have a high bar for that. And that takes a lot more time to build that network. You have to like train people and educate them and get them to sign up for new way of doing things and work your way across these different lanes and these different markets and methodically develop it. And I had to push back on a lot of our customers for years that wanted us to do everything. Like, why can't you do all these things? And it's because, a person is infinitely fungible. If I'm a bro, I can call anybody and I can work out a deal and customize something and get it done and call whatever carrier I need to get the job done for my customer. And that is fantastic because we wanted to use technology, which we believed would lead to a whole bunch of downstream benefits. We knew we had to go slower and we had to like limit ourselves because it takes a ton of work to build an automated technology-based solution. The technology, needs to be designed for something. So we do limit ourselves that way so we can offer a better experience. And ultimately we want to do more and more. We don't want to go faster than we can do it in a way that kind of stands by our principles and the promises we make.
It's funny because there have been shippers that come on the show and they say that one of the most hated types of companies would be the you call, we haul. We'll take anything you give us, blah, blah, blah. And they complain about those because the coolest thing about our industry is that different freight, different areas of the country, different commodities, obviously, they consist of a completely different type of expertise. In fact, we have on here, which is, this guy is so cool. Where did he go? Chandler with Next Exit Logistics. I saw him pop up in the comments, but he has some cool. He's like you, except for way more niche. And he does like really, really difficult flatbed shipments. He wants to be on the Christmas cousin. Chandler. And so like, the most difficult freight you can imagine, that's what he specializes in. Okay. And he's on the phone, he's on boots on the ground, like and that area of the business I hear stories about it and it's just so cool. But I couldn't imagine ever entering into it without it started as you call, we haul. We didn't know any better. That's so cool, Chandler. He, it's interesting because a lot of referrals and different things that he'll get, he says it's because people will try their hardest to run that type of freight and they just can't. And then they've got an upset customer. So it makes complete sense. There were a couple other people who had very good questions for you. The only reason I felt comfortable having part of this as an AMA is because you told me, Dan, one time that you do this with your company a lot, like with all your employees. They can ask you any question they want. And you're just all the time, even they ask you the hard questions. Someone in here says that they would love for you guys to get involved in bulk chemicals one day. So I guess Dan's definitely going to put that on his list, you guys. Okay. Dan, do you see a current demand? This is from Ignacio, whom I love. Dan, do you see a current demand for trucks / high-paying loads continuing into 2021? Do you have any ideas for us? Just so you know, the online chatter there's been a little bit of dip in the truckload rates lately. So I think we're all kind of sitting here thinking about that too.
Yeah, I think we've seen kind of an inevitable softening there. I think that there will, like, if you look at the last 3 months of this year and how truck prices continued to go up into Q4,
Yep.
in kind of an unprecedented, 200 and something days of rising rates way. We don't think that's going to continue next year. We do think that the market will stay strong next year, and it will be probably like the overall kind of the overall average next year will be down a little bit from what we're seeing right now in the last few months, but relative to this year, we think it'll be up. Like if you look at the average year across the board, and we think it's going to continue to stay strong. We've clearly learned, as everybody else has learned many times, but more this year than ever, there are factors outside of our control that can determine what exactly happens here. But I think from the trends we're seeing, we do expect that this will continue, and we think there's going to be continued kind of like energy spent on buying stuff in the next year as COVID continues. And again, how that plays out is going to make a big impact on this. So I also, one thing I try to do is not predict that too perfectly. Like one of the reasons, I mean, there's a lot of programs we're working on and building where I think trying to know exactly what's going to happen in the freight market is impossible over a long period of time. You can kind of see the cycles and understand that they will happen. Yeah, they will happen, but like exactly when and what month and how it's going to work exactly, especially in the times we're in today, is very, so we try to focus on, let's build systems that have more and more flexibility, can adapt quickly, and that have like a longer term horizon in terms of how we think about our partnerships.
May had a great question about waste. I saw it and I was thinking the same thing, May. Sorry, we're bouncing around on topics with you, Dan, but only because I'm trying to catch everybody's questions. May's going to come on the show one of these days too. She says, what do you consider waste? And I can add on to it, Dan, if you want to just tell us, what do you consider like the most wasteful thing in our industry? Because a lot of us have been in it so long, we don't even see the waste anymore. I'm not saying you've been in it for a while, so you get it too, but you know what I mean?
I get it. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a few things. One is, just at a really high level, if it's a fragmented, distributed system with lots of different people optimizing locally, so you're just going to have pockets of waste because it's like inevitable when you're everyone has best intentions, but it's going to happen. And the biggest areas of that today are, trucks that are running empty.
Yep.
Appointment times that are inefficiently and inefficiently managed. Again, where it's very hard to do that well, but like where that creates waste, both in terms of maybe like time wasted hours of service, wasted time, wasted money with, detention fees or even cancellation. And then also when the appointment times are kind of like difficult to schedule, you end up reducing the opportunities for backhauls and round trips as well, and like kind of more efficient networks. And so all that plays together in terms of some waste. I think some of the stuff also that like maybe is more challenging is it's a different. So that's how I think about waste. And there's other categories as well. When I talk about the mission, we have endless capacity and zero waste. It really boils down to, the customers and the shippers that we're working with want trucks when they need them, where they need them, at a fair rate, to be on time, great visibility, transparency, and like great service quality, right? Like flexible to their needs. Like that's really what you need, because most of the companies we work with have a volatile supply chain as well, where they don't always know everything up front. So they need flexibility and be able to adapt to it. And everyone's dealing with challenges, right? So they're looking for that. But to deliver on that, there is a lot of waste created in the categories we just talked about. So really the vision is, let's try to reduce as much of that unnecessary waste as possible. What if we could do it with this level of efficiency? And again, so it's about reducing unnecessary waste and getting to optimal efficiency. We actually ran a simulation in our network. We looked at every load we've ever done, all of the pickup times, drop-off times, where the load was picked, the distance, where it was picked, where it was dropped, the times of day, all that stuff. And we kind of tried to simulate what would have happened if we had run it completely efficiently. What if the world allowed us within our own network and our own volume to optimally match the carriers in our network to these jobs? And it was a big kind of Monte Carlo simulation. There was, I won't say the exact number, but the potential for us within the freight we do, just Convoy, which is a tiny sliver of the freight of the industry, was massive, that we could have done it better. We looked back in our history, like how much better we could have been in terms of efficiency if we had done all these things right.
When you say we, do you mean like you as Convoy or all three parts, like the carrier and the shipper and Convoy?
All of us working together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So all of us working together on the loads that we did, if we could have optimally matched them at the right times, with the right carrier, and like kind of redone everything, looking back and seeing the history of where everything was at the time, right? Kind of replaying it. And if everybody had agreed, if we could have been master of ceremonies and everybody agreed to do what we said, like, so in that theoretical world, how much waste could have we reduced? So that's kind of how we think about it. The other one is like, the being a truck driver is really hard. Being a small carrier is really hard. One of the reasons I love working with small carriers and owner operators is because they care, they're owners. They're not renting, they're owning, right? They own the business, they care about the quality, their reputation and their brand is based on the service that they offer and how they deliver, not the brand that they drive for, right? There's nothing wrong. Like there's a lot of companies that have like a big brand, great. That can be like the reputation is really kind of goes between carriers. But if you're a small carrier and owner operator, you have to show up every day to maintain kind of your brand and your reputation. So people work hard and they care. And we want to give them an outlet to be able to operate with the same benefits and kind of payment security and like showing up like they're actually part of a larger carrier, right? Like they have those that strength in market. And so I think when you look at waste, it's like there's a lot of wasted potential too, where I see some of the practices in the industry not supporting and taking care of those truck drivers. Like getting them, like taking care of them, making sure they're successful, making sure they have the opportunities, keeps the capacity in the market that we need. And I think when we don't take advantage of them, or there are systems that don't, like it actually hurts us as an industry.
I'm looking through some of these comments. I got sucked in too much to what you're saying, and I forgot. I'm sorry, guys. So we have 3 minutes left. This has been the fastest hour ever. Next Exit Logistics says not too many CEOs can humanize a truck driver. Good job, Dan. That's good. Do you know good carriers using areas? I saw one of my other favorite people. Where's Andrew Teal? Where did you go? Earlier, I just wanted to highlight, Andrew said softening will come as the Christmas rush freight basically has to be there next week, but 20 ships off. He's always using smart stuff that I don't know, like he goes over my head. The LALB, I don't know what that means, but I always try to illuminate his post because he's a lot smarter than me. I don't tell him that though.
He's talking about Long Beach.
Oh, is that what he's talking about? Oh, lawyer fail right there. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so I'm going to be selfish and take up the 2 minutes. You guys, everybody who has continued questions, we will beg Dan to come on again, and I'll remember all your questions, and we'll just keep drilling him, poor guy. 2 minutes. What is new? Anything we don't know that we need to know about Convoy? Anything else you're working on? Just want to make sure that I'm not forgetting. Like we're talking about the now a lot in the past, but I want to make sure I'm not forgetting any or losing any exciting stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, all the things we talked about, like we believe in the mission of being able to use technology to improve the experience that people have in this industry across the, like there's a bunch of ways you can find experience while reducing waste and cost. That's not just a Convoy thing. Like that's the mission of what we want to go do. So what really matters is we're going to do that. We're trying to set some, we talked about this last time on the show, like new business models, new pricing models, new systems. Like that's not just for Convoy. Like I really want like the other companies in the industry we want to push some new ideas and collaborate and like understand their ideas as well, because we want to move this forward. And we think there are better ways to do certain things. And so, I think the last thing I'll just say is like, let's go and let's get like, this is about Convoy figuring it out, but it's about like a better future state of this industry. And if we can reduce a bunch of waste and reduce a bunch of costs and give people a better experience, I want a bunch of other companies to start doing those things too. Right. So that's really how we think about the future here. And I couldn't be more excited going into next year. Like, we have assembled an incredible team, and I'm just super fired up. I think we have so much to do. So I'm glad I could be here and talk about it. I love the challenging questions and support from the industry. And like, there's a long road, but like, let's go.
Yeah, let's fucking go. You guys are kicking butt, and don't forget to keep pushing. You won't stop, but I love your culture. I love all the Convoy people. Like, I love you guys. Thank you for your messages. Keep doing your thing and keep infiltrating our industry. All right, you guys, we have I'll post a couple posts about next Friday. Very interesting show for y'all next Friday. And then that's it for this year. So thank you for tuning in to MadGaines, and have a great weekend.